You are listening to the daily homily for Magdala in the Holy Land.
Jesus and his disciples came to the other side of the sea, to the territory of the Gerasenes. When he got out of the boat, at once a man from the tombs who had an unclean spirit met him. The man had been dwelling among the tombs, and no one could restrain him any longer, even with a chain. In fact, he had frequently been bound with shackles and chains, but the chains had been pulled apart by him and the shackles smashed, and no one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the hillsides, he was always crying out and bruising himself with stones. Catching sight of Jesus from a distance, he ran up and prostrated himself before him, crying out in a loud voice, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me." He had been saying to him, "Unclean spirit, come out of the man." He asked him, "What is your name?" He replied, "Legion is my name. There are many of us." And he pleaded earnestly with him not to drive them away from that territory. Now a large herd of swine was feeding there on the hillside, and they pleaded with him, "Send us into the swine. Let us enter them." And he led them, and the unclean spirits came out and entered the swine. The herd of about 2,000 rushed down a steep bank into the sea, where they were drowned. The swineherds ran away and reported the incident in the town and throughout the countryside, and people came out to see what had happened. And they approached Jesus. They caught sight of the man who had been possessed by legion, sitting there clothed and in his right mind. And they were seized by fear. Those who witnessed the incident explained to them what had happened to the possessed man and to the swine. Then they began to beg him to leave their district. As he was getting into the boat, the man who had been possessed pleaded to remain with him. But Jesus would not permit him, but told him instead, "Go home to your family and announce to them all that the Lord in his pity has done for you." Then the man went off and began to proclaim in the Decapolis what Jesus had done for him, and all were amazed. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Dear brothers and sisters, this passage of the Gospel somehow is a cousin of Magdala, because it happened, as you heard at the beginning, at the end, when Jesus was traveling on a boat with his disciples. And after this, he eventually will come to Magdala, even though the Gospels do not mention the name Magdala, but they say he got into the boat, crossed across the lake, and upon getting out of the boat, a big crowd gathered around him. Some days ago, I received a message, very amazing message. It's from a lady I have been following up since several years during the virtual pilgrimages. And this lady had been suffering a lot of many things in her family, her children, in herself, job problems, family problems, lot of things. I met her last September while in Mexico City, traveling around and giving talks. And this lady reported to me some days ago that she had been finally freed from some demons. And she said the last one was the toughest one. Because Satan works in our hearts, in our souls, in very different ways. It's not always stoning at you or smashing you against the tombs or doing these kind of things. But he goes inside your psychology, in between your emotions, your feelings, your imaginations, and he tries to disturb you, to make you think strange things, to try to distract you from the truth, from the holiness that you may want to achieve with the grace of God. Satan is old enough to know well all human beings and to know how he would try to get us out of the right path. It's amazing. But we have Jesus. Jesus wants to free us from any kind of possession, any kind, from the simplest temptation to the worst sin or action of Satan in our hearts. He really wants to free us from that. And he came to this world for that, and he established his holy church for that. The first reading today from the letter to the Hebrews is like a panoramic contemplation of the history of salvation in terms of people of faith. And it says how they were able to overcome amazing things, fights, demons, persecutions, lots of problems out of faith. Look, this is an untangible good that sometimes we forget, even sometimes in church environments. We want the sacristy, we want the vessels for the altar, we want the books, we want the staff in the church, we want the choir to be amazing, the organ has to be ultra, mega, super. What about the faith of our people? What about their beliefs? What about their attachment to the truth? I think that we should take more care of this and less of the practical and material things. But at the end of the reading, the letter says that they did not receive what had been promised. God had foreseen something better for us. They struggled and they fought for amazing things, but we had something much better because we have Jesus himself. We have the grace of God. We were reborn in baptism. For this reason, the responsorial psalm today says, "Let your hearts take comfort, all who hope in the Lord." The whole liturgy today is inviting us to be men and women of faith and hope. Something that you cannot touch, you cannot measure, you cannot count, but is so important. In our world today, we need people of faith and hope. people that can be reference for others, light, guiding brothers and sisters for others who go in the darkness and they don't know how to behave, what to do, what choices to make in life. I want to comment the last thing. At the end of the gospel today, this man who had been possessed pleaded to remain with him. I can imagine this guy, after all this suffering, after all this trouble, he wanted to stay with Jesus, of course. And Jesus said, no. Go home to your family and announce to them all that the Lord in His pity has done for you. Look, maybe he could have been an amazing disciple and even apostle. But Jesus wanted better him to go home to console his people, his family, after all those problems that he caused to them. Jesus thinks of every one of us. But this caught my attention because, as we well know, Jesus was followed by a number of people, men and women as well. And that means that nobody could follow Jesus just because they wanted to. Jesus accepted or did not accept some of them to be his followers. Things will not happen by chance around Jesus. He wanted somebody to be his followers. And he was instructing them. He was pushing them into the practice of his message, his kingdom. He was training them. It was not by chance that one or the other became a follower of Jesus. I think this is important even for us to find what is our role within the church, in our community. We need to ask Jesus, what do you want from me? You want to be a closer disciple? You want me to be an apostle? You want me to be what you want from me? He may tell us, go home and give good example to your brothers and sisters. Or he may say, come, follow me. Just ask today the good Lord to be men and women of faith and hope, as much as the world needs this today.
Thank you for joining us today. If you want to learn more about Magdala, follow us on YouTube and on Facebook.